to God, and on earth peace, goodwill among men.
Hello. Today I wanted to explore what I call the building blocks of spirituality. The building blocks essentially are leading towards this final goal of a relationship with God. A relationship with God that is healthy is built on a number of things that are necessary to help us along in our path. It doesn't come automatically. As I said before, we're not born coming out of the womb praising God, but instead it's something that comes about over time. There are very few people who are born remarkably spiritual. Most of them they get a lot of gray hairs and they work towards it. I'm not anywhere near that. That's why I have so few gray hairs. Look at the rest. That's not a dye job. But getting back to the topic at hand, how do we get to that relationship with God? Well, the first place that it begins is with worship. Now, you may say, what does worship have to do with a relationship with God? Well, it is through worship that we first learn about God. Worship is the worshiping community, is where we come to church, where the scriptures are read and they're sung about. We hear the preaching and the teaching, and we learn about God. You really can't say, well, I could just go home and have my own relationship with God, because you didn't know about God until somebody taught you. It is this worshiping community where it begins, and we begin to praise God. And this is why, for example, the Orthodox Church gets that term orthodoxus, right, glorifying, right here, the very beginning, worship. Now, what does worship do? Well, as you begin to sing and talk about God, eventually you're going to want to talk to God. And this is where we get prayer. Prayer begins after we learn about God. We learn that we have somebody that we can talk to, and then we begin to talk to Him. They come through petitions and requests. And it is here where we begin to move closer to God. Now, as we worship and we begin to pray, we take this communal activity home with us. And eventually, what comes about is, after a certain amount of time where we talk to God, eventually we need to listen to God. It can't just be a one-way street where we're just talking. And this is where the practice of silence comes about. Throughout the history of Christianity, silence has played an important role in spiritual development. In the Eastern Church, the practice of silence is called hesychia, which is Greek for silence. It's also called hesychasm. It's a fancy word. I won't try to spell it for you. But it is the time here where we go from talking to God to listening for His voice, which comes in that still, soft silence. Now, a funny thing happens, though, is in worshiping, we learn about God and His goodness, and we begin to see that we have problems that we need help with, and we ask for God's help. And as we sit in silence, we very often, the first thing that we're going to hear before we hear the voice of God, and if you are hearing the voice of God, well, that's a topic for a different video. But as we begin to listen for God, let's say, a strange thing happens. The first thing that we're going to hear is all the stuff that is going on upstairs in our own brains. There are those constant bombardment of thoughts and memories. And as we go back to our fears, which are driven by two factors, our resentment and our unforgiveness of other people, coupled with our sense of indebtedness to others, we realize that we have a lot of negative thinking, things that we're ashamed of, things that we're afraid of, that are going on in our heads. We need to get rid of it. And this is where confession comes in. Now, anybody who says they don't believe in confession, I really hope that they're consistent about it, and so they don't believe in counselors or talking to people and getting advice or doing anything other than just simply thinking about their problems and somehow coming up with a solution. Confession is a process of self-examination and elimination. It's an attempt to get rid of and finalize the unresolved situations that are in our lives. If we are suffering from our lack of forgiveness towards others, it is here where we forgive. We learn to forgive. On the other hand, if we are, let's say, we feel that we owe something, it is here where we learn to apologize and to restore. The final step is that, now remember here, and here you can kind of see this little triangle here. This is our personal spiritual lives of prayer, silence, and confession going on right here. But there's something else that happens is through confession, all that, we realize that we are selfish. We realize that we have not done unto others properly. And so here comes good works. Good works is where we are of service to other people. It may be that we learn to become teachers and teach the gospel precepts. It may be that we give alms, acts of mercy to the poor. We may start being kind to other people if we've been selfish and manipulative and all of that, but we start treating people well. And again, you need a community to do that in. So again, you've got worship, prayer, and good works. This is your church community. And you can see that we need both a strong personal spiritual life, but also a good communal life. And all of these things together build up to that relationship with God. You remove any one of these things, the whole thing collapses. If you really look at it, can you have true religion, in the words of the Epistle of James? Can you have true religion without doing anything nice for others? The answer is no. If we hold on to all of our resentment and anger and fears, do you think that we're going to be able to really receive God's love and forgiveness and healing? Absolutely not. Take out the silence where we are just running around making noise and shouting and screaming and avoiding ourselves. We're not even going to get to this stage, but this whole thing comes tumbling down. You can't have it. So we need all of these elements together to have that relationship with God. And in the Orthodox Church, that spiritual development is usually expressed in 3 stages. Purification, which happens here. Illumination, which happens again here. And then finally, glorification, which is that direct connection to God, where we have removed the things that impede our spiritual progress. We approach God, and finally God transforms us. This final stage with God is the transformative stage, where His grace and His love renew us and bring us back to the way He intended us to be. So I hope that these building blocks of spirituality will help you better understand how to look at your own spiritual life and your spiritual development. And I hope you'll stick around for some of the other videos. So thank you.